I died with my eyes open. That was the worst part. Not the screaming crowds, not the weight of the chains cutting into my wrists, not even the sight of my own sister standing there in pearls and silk, watching as if I were a stranger. It was the moment before the blade fell, when I looked up and saw him. Jake. Her fiancé. The man who had once been mine in every way but name. His face didn't flinch. His cold gray eyes didn't blink. He looked at me the same way he had the day they dragged me into the throne room, bloodied and accused. With silence. I remember thinking, if I had one more day, just one more month, I would burn it all down before they touched me. Then everything went black. And when I opened my eyes again, I was in my chambers. The fire was still crackling in the hearth. The silk sheet still smelled like rosewater. And the calendar on my wall, my hand trembled as I reached for it. Read exactly 1 month before the day I was sentenced to die. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I sat up, took a deep breath, and smiled. The world believed Princess Anna was naive. Sweet. Soft. The perfect shadow to her older sister Lily's brilliance. I had spent my entire life playing that role, thinking I was being kind. Thinking I was safe. But now I knew better. Lily had smiled through her lies. Jake had stood in silence. And I had been foolish. But not this time. I spent the first morning doing nothing but remembering. Every whispered conversation. Every planted letter. Every false witness. The betrayal hadn't come all at once. It had been slow. Clever. A game of shadows that I hadn't realized I was playing until I'd already lost. But this time I had every move memorized. I began with the small things. The handmaid who slipped forged letters under my pillow. I had always thought she was clumsy, harmless. But I remembered now how she testified that she saw me writing letters to enemy spies. How she cried in court as if she were heartbroken. I found her by the laundry quarters, flirting with a footman. I greeted her with a warm smile and told her I wanted her as my personal maid. She beamed. I let her think she had won again. Next came the council reports. In my first life, I had spoken out against a new trade alliance that I later realized was a front for bribery. That speech had made me a target. This time, I didn't argue. I let Lily charm the council. I asked innocent questions. I laughed at the jokes. And when the king praised Lily, I clapped the loudest. The court saw the same sweet, soft Anna. But inside, I was already rewiring every string they thought they held. Jake, of course, was harder. He was engaged to Lily. Everyone said it was a perfect match. She was beautiful and bold, and he was powerful and cold. They looked good together in portraits. But I knew the truth. Or rather, I had learned it too late. He didn't love her. He didn't love anyone. He respected strength. And he hated lies. That was why he had looked at me that way when I was accused. Not with hatred. With disappointment. He had believed I was weak. I would prove him wrong. The first time I saw him again, it was during weapons training. I had never gone near the sparring grounds in my past life. It was considered unseemly for a princess. But I remembered that he trained there every morning at dawn. So I went. Dressed plainly, hair tied back, I watched from the edge. When he noticed me, he barely nodded. Looking for someone? He asked. I tilted my head. Just watching. I've never seen swordplay up close. He gave a short laugh. And you think this is up close? I stepped onto the dirt, just enough to get my slippers dusty. Closer than I've ever dared. He studied me, then returned to his practice. I watched the way he moved. Controlled, fast, precise. Jake had always been like that. He didn't waste words. He didn't pretend to be kind. He saw the world in wins and losses. That was why Lily had chased him. That was why I had fallen for him. And that was why I would beat him at his own game. The rest of the week was about setting the stage. I stayed out of the spotlight. I let Lily take the attention, let her believe nothing had changed. I praised her new gown. I asked for her advice. I even let her choose the menu for the king's banquet, knowing full well that she'd select something rich and elaborate, which I remembered had made the king ill for 2 days. Meanwhile, I visited the kitchens. I thanked the staff. I slipped coins into the servants' pockets. I needed eyes in every room. I needed ears. I also visited the old scribe, Peter. He had once worked closely with the court historians but was dismissed for being slow. In my first life, he had disappeared without warning. Later I learned he had uncovered changes to the royal records, changes that made me look like I had signed documents I never saw. I found him in the dusty corners of the library, sorting scrolls. "Princess," he stammered when I entered. I smiled gently. "Peter, I need your help with something. And I believe you're the only one I can trust." His eyes widened. I didn't need to say more. People remembered kindness. But they also remembered betrayal. And this time I would turn every forgotten piece into a weapon. As the moon rose that night, I sat by the window, staring at the stars. A month. That was all I had. 1 month until the day Lily stood in court and said I was a traitor. 1 month until Jake looked at me with that cold, empty stare. 1 month until the gallows. Except this time I wasn't walking to my death. I was walking them to theirs. When you pretend to be blind, people get careless. That was the first lesson I learned in my second life. I smiled at the right people, nodded in all the right places, and asked just enough questions to seem harmless. And they believed it. Lily believed it. Jake wasn't sure yet, but he wasn't asking the right questions either. That was good. The more he watched me, the more time I had to build the trap they wouldn't see coming. I began the day with my new handmaid, Kara. In my old life, she had played her role perfectly. Wide-eyed, soft-spoken, and loyal to the wrong sister. She had claimed I sent letters to a foreign prince, letters she claimed to have found hidden under my pillows. I had never seen those letters before the trial. But this time I watched her carefully. I praised her every move. I let her bring me tea and brush my hair and hum those silly songs she liked. And then I quietly searched her belongings when she left the room. I found the first fake letter folded inside a pouch sewn into her apron. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I copied the handwriting, memorized the seal. Then I burned the letter in the fireplace, replaced it with a blank one, and sat back down like nothing had happened. When she returned, she didn't notice a thing. Later that morning, I wandered the palace corridors as if lost in thought. In truth, I was tracing the path that Ben, the guard who testified against me, used to take. I found him in the east wing, checking the window locks. Just like before. He was younger than I remembered, softer around the eyes. He didn't know what he'd become yet. I approached him slowly. "Ben, isn't it?" He stood up straighter, startled. "Yes, Your Highness." "Do you enjoy your post?" I asked. He blinked. "Yes, ma'am. Very much." "Good," I said. "Then I hope it stays that way." He frowned, confused, but I didn't wait for a reply. I kept walking. Sometimes, fear planted early was more effective than punishment later. That afternoon, I found myself alone with Lily in the parlor. She was dressed in one of her new gowns, deep blue silk trimmed in gold. It brought out her eyes. She always knew how to present herself. She poured tea like nothing was wrong. Like she hadn't already started meeting with the foreign envoy in secret. Like she wasn't already plotting to remove me from the line of succession. "You're quiet today," she said. I smiled. "Just tired. These council meetings are exhausting." "You don't have to attend, you know. Father would understand." "I want to be helpful," I said softly. She tilted her head. "You've changed." I took a sip of tea. "Have I?" She didn't answer. But I saw the flicker in her eyes. Doubt. Suspicion. That meant I was doing something right. The council meeting the next day was uneventful on the surface. But I watched closely. I saw how Lord Marcus passed Lily a folded note under the table. I saw how Sir Regan waited to speak until Lily nodded. These men had been her allies before. The ones who turned on me first. I memorized the timing of their glances, the rhythm of their lies. I said little. I praised their efforts. I asked about the tax report, then let them explain it to me like a child. They enjoyed that. They thought I was simple. Easy. But as they spoke, I tucked the conversation away like weapons in a chest. Jake was there, of course. He always sat at the end of the long table, arms crossed, face unreadable. He rarely spoke unless addressed. But I noticed he looked at me when I mentioned the eastern border patrols, something I only knew because in my first life, that's where he was the day I was arrested. This time, he wouldn't be. Not if I could help it. I needed to shift his loyalties. Slowly. Carefully. I remembered the stories the servants whispered about him. That he had no heart. That he didn't love Lily, but had agreed to marry her for the alliance. That he never smiled. I had seen him smile once. In my first life. It had been brief, almost accidental. I'd made a joke at dinner, and his lips twitched. I remembered thinking then that he might not be as cold as everyone believed. But it hadn't mattered. By then, the plot was already in motion. Now, I had time. So I set a trap for him too. The king's hunting trip was scheduled for the weekend. In the past, I never attended. It was considered a man's affair. But this time I insisted. I want to learn, I told the king. He laughed, pleased. Lily's never shown interest in the sport. Then I'll be the first, I said. Jake raised an eyebrow but said nothing. On the day of the hunt, I wore a simple riding outfit and kept my hair in a braid. I didn't try to impress him. I let him watch as I struggled to mount the horse, laughed at myself, and asked questions about the terrain. He was patient, too patient. That was my first clue. He wasn't ignoring me. He was studying me. During the ride, I pulled alongside him. What does a hunting party do, exactly? I asked. Aside from the obvious. You learn who trusts who, he said without looking at me. Who rides ahead? Who hangs back? Who waits to strike? Sounds familiar, I said lightly. That made him glance at me. Just for a second. But it was enough. That night, back at the palace, I found a note under my pillow. Written in careful script. You're not what you seem. That makes two of us. There was no name. But I didn't need one. I folded the note and tucked it under my sleeve. Then I looked out the window toward the stars. The game had started. And this time, I had the first move. In my first life, I avoided Jake. I told myself it was because he belonged to Lily, and I was being loyal. But the truth was simpler and sadder. I avoided him because I didn't think I could win. He was cold, calculating, unreadable. He didn't waste time with people he didn't respect. And I had spent years being sweet, soft, and forgettable. I knew how he saw me back then. As a shadow of my sister. Someone easy to ignore. Someone who wouldn't survive. But I had survived. I had died and come back sharper, stronger, and more dangerous than anyone could imagine. This time I wasn't going to hide from Jake. I was going to make sure he saw me. And then I was going to make him choose. The note under my pillow haunted me all night. Not because of what it said, but because of what it meant. He knew. Maybe not everything, but enough to start asking questions. That made him both dangerous and useful. And it meant the next few days had to be handled with care. I couldn't push too fast. I couldn't show my hand. I needed to be intriguing, but not suspicious. Open, but not exposed. That was the trick with someone like Jake. You couldn't force his attention. You had to earn it. So I let him come to me. The palace gardens were my favorite place when I was a child. I remembered sitting by the rose trellis, reading old fairy tales and dreaming of love like the ones in the stories. That was before I learned that love, in real life, comes with terms and consequences. But the garden still gave me peace. So I made sure to be there every morning, walking slowly through the hedges, stopping by the fountain, pretending not to notice the shadow that followed me at a distance. Jake's guard, Thomas, was easy to miss if you didn't know what to look for. But I remembered his stance, his habits, and most of all, his loyalty. He wouldn't have followed me unless Jake told him to. Which meant Jake was watching. I gave him something to watch. One morning, I let Thomas see me stop by the stables to visit the younger servant girls. I helped one of them feed an injured colt. I smiled and listened to their chatter. Then I walked away, leaving behind a silver pin with the royal crest tucked in the hay. A small thing, but enough to be reported. A few hours later, Jake found me in the library. He said nothing at first. Just stood at the edge of the room, watching me run my fingers over the spines of old books. I didn't turn to greet him. I let the silence stretch, let it become just awkward enough. You dropped something this morning, he said finally. I glanced over my shoulder. Did I? He held out the pin. You should be more careful. A royal seal in the wrong hands causes complications. I walked over, took it from him with 2 fingers, and met his eyes. I trust the hands it ended up in. He said nothing. But the way his gaze narrowed told me he was trying to figure out if I was reckless or clever. That was good. Let him wonder. I didn't think you noticed where I go, I added casually. I notice everything, he said. And then he left. That was how it began. The strange game of glances, silences, and questions wrapped in other questions. I didn't chase him. I made him curious. And that was more powerful than any declaration of love. But while Jake was watching me, I was watching Lily. She had started meeting with a foreign diplomat in secret. In my first life, I never knew how early the conversations began. Now I saw that they were already whispering in corners, exchanging gifts, planting stories in court. She was moving fast. I had to move faster. I visited the kitchens again, this time under the pretense of helping with the spring banquet. In reality, I was looking for Mila, the cook's daughter. She had been the one who, unknowingly, served the poisoned wine at the banquet where I was blamed for the king's illness. In my first life, she was dismissed after the scandal and vanished without a trace. This time, I found her scrubbing pots in the back. "I'd like to speak with you," I said softly. She jumped, startled. "Your Highness?" "I want you to handle the king's meals during the banquet. Only you. No one else. And if anyone asks you to change that, anyone at all, you come to me first." She looked terrified. "Did I do something wrong?" "No," I said gently. "You're the only one I trust." That was a lie. But it was a kind one. And it would keep her close enough that I could protect her, and the king. Back in my chambers, I began collecting the pieces I needed. Names. Locations. Times. I kept a journal hidden behind the false panel in my wardrobe. I wrote in it every night by candlelight, recording who Lily spoke to, which servants were loyal to her, which nobles looked uneasy when I entered the room. I was building a map of betrayal. And it was almost complete. One evening, I found myself walking through the training yard again. I had no reason to be there, which was exactly why I went. Jake was sparring with one of the younger knights. I stood at the edge, silent, until he noticed me. He stopped mid-swing and turned toward me. "Looking for someone?" he asked. "No," I said. "Just thinking." Dangerous habit in a place like this. I know. But thinking is the only thing that kept me alive this long. His eyes sharpened. "Alive?" I smiled. Figure of speech. He didn't look convinced. He walked toward me slowly, sword still in hand. "You've changed." "I've had to." He looked down at the sword, then back at me. "You ever held one of these?" "No, would you like to?" I stepped forward. "Show me." He placed the hilt in my hand, adjusted my grip, then stepped back. "Try swinging it." I did. It was heavy, awkward, clumsy. But I didn't drop it. "You'll need practice," he said. "I'm a fast learner." He smiled, barely. But it was a smile. That night, when I returned to my chambers, another note was waiting on my pillow. "You are not weak." I was wrong. No name. No seal. Just the truth. I folded it, pressed it to my lips, and smiled. Jake was no longer just watching. He was wondering whose side he was on. And soon, he'd make the wrong choice for the right reason. Just like I planned. The royal banquet was scheduled to honor the visiting envoy, but I knew it was never meant to be just a feast. In my first life, it was the night that began my end. The night the king collapsed after a sip of wine. The night I was accused of treason. They said the bottle came from me, that I was trying to claim the throne while our father was ill. The court turned against me in an instant. Jake didn't speak a word. Lily shed crocodile tears while hiding the dagger behind her back. But this time I was ready. I knew what was coming, and I had already tilted the board. I spent the morning in the kitchens. Mila looked startled when I entered, but I kept my tone light and friendly. I checked every wine barrel, watched every bottle being uncorked. I pulled the servant in charge of pouring aside and replaced him with a footman I had won over with kindness and gold. I tasted the king's wine myself, sweet, tart, untainted. I didn't leave the kitchens until I saw the entire banquet set prepared under my supervision. Poison would not touch the king tonight. But I needed it to look like it had tried. I arranged for the decoy bottle. The one that had been tampered with in my first life, to be left in Lily's favorite wine casket. Just enough of a trail for the right eyes to follow. I made sure the bottle was removed at the last minute and replaced with a safe one. And then I waited. Dressed in soft lilac, my hair pinned simply, I entered the banquet hall like a girl who still believed in fairy tales. Let them see innocence. Let them believe I was unarmed. Jake was already seated beside Lily, who wore crimson and smiled like she'd already won. The king looked tired but content. Music floated softly through the air. Courtiers laughed too loud and watched each other too closely. This was the part one hadn't appreciated before, how fragile everything really was. How power balanced on the edge of a goblet. A whisper. A glance. The first toast went as planned. The king raised his glass. Everyone followed. But before he could drink, I stood. "May I?" I asked, stepping forward. The room quieted. "I'd like to offer the first toast tonight. To family. To loyalty. To the courage it takes to tell the truth when no one wants to hear it." There were a few confused smiles. Lily froze. Jake tilted his head. I raised my glass and drank. A few moments passed. Then I smiled, perfectly calm. "Delicious," I said. The king laughed and drank. Slowly, the others followed. Lily picked up her own goblet, stared at it for half a second longer than necessary, then sipped. I watched her carefully. She looked fine. The wine wasn't poisoned. But the seed of doubt was planted. The bottle that should have been used was missing. And I made sure the wine steward found it. An hour later, I slipped from the banquet hall and found the steward pacing near the cellars. He bowed low when he saw me. "Your Highness," he whispered. "There's a bottle with a broken seal. From the wrong vineyard. I don't know how it got into the king's selection." "I'm sure it's nothing," I said softly. "But I'd feel better if you showed it to the guards." Quietly. He nodded, already spooked. By morning, the report would be filed. And Lily would know someone was watching. Back in the hall, the music swelled. Couples danced. Laughter returned. I pretended to enjoy myself. I laughed at jokes. I smiled at old nobles. I let Jake watch me. I didn't approach him, but I stayed in his line of sight. I didn't want to seem like I needed his attention. I wanted him to miss it when it wasn't there. After the banquet, the king retired early. Lily vanished. And I took a quiet walk through the garden, where Jake found me again. He said nothing at first. Just walked beside me. "Interesting toast," he said eventually. "Too sentimental?" I asked. "Too sharp." I looked up at him. "Truth hurts." I didn't say it wasn't true. We reached the stone bench by the rose wall. I sat. He remained standing. "I know there's something happening," he said. "I don't know what. But I know you're not who you were." I met his eyes. "That's a good thing, isn't it?" He didn't answer. But he didn't walk away. "I'm not asking you to believe me," I continued. "I'm asking you to watch. Carefully. And then decide for yourself." He looked at me for a long time. "You've been watching me too," he said. I didn't deny it. Why? Because I wanted to see if the man who stood by during my trial was the same man who might speak up if he saw the truth. His jaw clenched. "You were accused of treason." I was framed. His silence was louder than any shout. "Then why didn't you say anything back then?" he asked. "I thought you already made your choice," I said quietly. Another pause. Then he sat beside me. "If I made the wrong one, I won't do it again." We didn't say anything after that. The night stretched on. Stars blinked above us. For a moment, I didn't feel like I was trapped in a game of masks and lies. I felt something dangerously close to hope. But I couldn't afford hope. Not yet. The next day, I sent an anonymous report to the royal guard with evidence of the false wine bottle and its mismatched seal. I knew they would trace it back to one of Lily's merchants. I made sure of it. I also planted a note in the pocket of a certain councilman, reminding him of a favor Lily owed him and how fast debts can become weapons. The court was shifting. Slowly. Quietly. But it was happening. And Jake? He started attending more council meetings. He asked sharper questions. He spent less time with Lily. More time walking past the places I happened to be. The mask he wore was beginning to slip. And I was ready to see what lay underneath. Everything was about timing. I had learned that the hard way in my first life. The betrayal didn't come as one blow, it came as a series of perfectly placed strikes. A whispered lie here. A missing letter there. People had already made up their minds before I even stood trial. So in this life, I didn't wait for them to move first. I moved ahead of them. Quietly. Precisely. Every day was a chance to shift the pieces before the blade dropped again. With the banquet over and the poisoned wine exposed, subtly, not loudly. The court was already whispering. The bottle had been traced to a merchant from Lily's network. The merchant claimed innocence, said the bottle had been gifted to him months ago. But the damage was done. People began to question whether the royal favorite, Lily, the king's darling, was as untouchable as they believed. She smiled through the rumors. She laughed louder at dinner. But her fingers twitched at her side, and she started keeping her guard closer. Meanwhile, I made my next move. Peter, the old scribe I had approached weeks ago, delivered what I'd been waiting for. In my first life, he had been dismissed after trying to speak up about forged royal orders. This time, I had hidden him under my protection and given him a simple request: find the records that were changed. He returned with a bundle of scrolls, yellowed and dusty. These are the originals, he whispered in the library, eyes darting. And these, he pointed to the fresh ink and too clean parchment, are the copies they placed in the official record. I didn't need to read far. One showed my seal on a document requesting troop movements along the border, movements that were used to frame me for plotting an invasion. The forged copy was identical, but the language had been changed subtly. Words twisted into treason. I memorized every difference, then burned both versions. I couldn't risk the originals being found. But I had what I needed. The knowledge. The pattern. The proof in my hands would only be used when I had Jake on my side fully, and when Lily had no way out. I found Jake 2 days later in the strategy room, hunched over a map with his guard, Thomas. They were discussing fortress placements along the western ridge. I waited silently until he noticed me. He gave a slight nod, dismissed Thomas, and stepped away from the table. You've been busy, he said. I've had a lot to think about. He tilted his head. You always this careful with your thinking? Only when my life depends on it. He folded his arms. You want something? Yes, I said. But not what you think. Try me. I want you to listen. He didn't move. Didn't blink. But he stayed. There were orders, I said. Forged ones. Last time, they were used to paint me as a traitor. This time, I've already found them. And I know who helped rewrite them. His jaw tightened. That's a dangerous accusation. Which is why I'm not making it public. Yet. I'm telling you, because I need you to stop protecting people who are already planning your downfall. He studied me. And you think that includes Lily? I know it does. He didn't respond. But the silence wasn't rejection, it was calculation. She used you, I added. She will again. You're asking me to betray my future wife. I'm asking you to wake up before she does it to you first. He didn't speak. Just walked past me and out of the room. I let him go. Because I knew what I'd just done. I had cracked something in him. That night, the court historian, another man who had played a role in my conviction, was found unconscious outside the archives. He had fallen, the guards claimed. But I knew better. I had sent a note to one of the quieter council members earlier that day. A note that revealed the historian's bribes and changes to military logs. I hadn't signed it. But I didn't need to. Fear spreads fast when planted in familiar soil. Over the next few days, I watched the court shift. Certain lords stopped speaking so freely. Some visited the chapel more often. Others watched me with new wariness. I let them. The more they feared me, the less likely they were to strike. Lily, however, wasn't fooled. She came to me in the drawing room one afternoon, her smile too perfect, her tone too sweet. Sister, she said, I've noticed how involved you've been lately. Only trying to be helpful, I replied. Of course. You've always been so eager to help. Her eyes glittered with something sharp. I wonder if Father's illness has made you nervous. About your place. I met her gaze. Only people with something to hide worry about their place. She leaned in slightly. You should be careful. Playing at power can be dangerous. Especially for someone as gentle as you. I'll keep that in mind. She left after that. But she didn't smile again. Jake found me later that evening on the tower steps overlooking the city. He didn't say anything at first. Just stood beside me, hands behind his back. You were right, he said. I turned. About what? She's meeting with foreign diplomats behind the council's back. I have proof now. I nodded. So do I. He looked at me fully then. Why are you doing this? Because I already know what happens if I don't. His voice dropped. What are you really trying to do, Anna? I answered without flinching. Survive. He stared at me, long and hard. And then he said the words I had been waiting for. Then we do it together. That night, for the first time, I didn't feel like I was fighting alone. Jake was no longer an obstacle. He was my ally. And together, we were going to dismantle the empire Lily had built, brick by gilded brick. The masquerade announcement changed everything. In my first life, I remembered the way the royal court lit up with excitement. It was supposed to be a night of celebration, a display of wealth and power before the king's health would publicly be declared in decline. But for me, it had marked the beginning of the end. That was the night Lily had arranged for me to be humiliated in front of foreign dignitaries. She'd orchestrated whispers, scattered fake letters through noble hands, and ensured the Crown Prince of Dalmore confronted me during the waltz, accusing me of seducing him for political leverage. My name was torn to pieces before I even stepped off the ballroom floor. And by the next morning, I was already under investigation. But not this time. This time, I would be the one behind the mask. I would be the one whispering. Watching. Listening. Pulling strings no one could see. When the king declared the masquerade, Lily clapped her hands in delight, already imagining herself at the center of every dance. I pretended to be amused. "What colors are you planning to wear?" she asked me that evening. I smiled. "Oh, something soft. Something invisible." She laughed. As usual. And I let her believe that. The court seamstress was swamped with requests, so I went to a hidden tailor in the city, one I remembered from my first life who had worked in secret for mistresses and mercenaries alike. I arrived cloaked and hooded, calling myself Mira. I told her I needed a mask that commanded silence. She gave me a design of deep silver stitched with black thread, faceless and sharp. A dress to match, tailored like armor but flowing like silk. When I tried it on, I didn't look like a princess. I looked like a question mark. Perfect. Back at the palace, I resumed my daily routine, observing, interfering, planting seeds. I made sure to appear at Jake's side during the military council meeting, supporting his plan to fortify the Western Ridge. It wasn't a controversial decision, but the point wasn't the content. It was the court seeing us stand together. The ripple was subtle, but I saw the looks. They didn't know what we were yet, but they were starting to sense something shifting. Lily noticed, too. She cornered me in the solarium, her voice sweet as honey but her words bitter. "Funny how you've taken such an interest in Jake's affairs." "Is it funny?" I asked, picking a petal from a dying flower. "I think it's wise." "You think you can steal him now?" I raised an eyebrow. "Why would I steal something that was never truly yours?" The air between us turned colder than the marble floor. "I always knew you envied me," she said. "But this is desperate. It's sad." "I'm not desperate," I said. "I'm patient." "That's different." She didn't speak after that. Just stormed off, leaving behind the faint scent of roses and venom. The day before the masquerade, Jake came to me with a sealed letter. "It's from my father," he said. "He's withdrawing support from Lily's claim. Says too many rumors are circling her name." I opened the letter and scanned it. It was real. Noble houses moved fast when they sensed a ship might sink. I folded it and handed it back. "She'll be desperate now," I said. "More than she already is?" "She thinks she still has time. Tomorrow night, we'll take the rest from her." "You're sure about this?" I met his eyes. "Would you follow me if I wasn't?" He didn't blink. "I already am." That night, I didn't sleep. I paced the room, rehearsing the plan. At the masquerade, I would enter under the false name I'd used at the tailor's. Mira. I would avoid the official entrance, slipping in through the servants' corridor, already mapped out in my journal. My dress and mask would conceal everything, my identity, my rank, my history. I would listen to every conversation. Drop the right name in the right ear. Dance with the right people. And when the moment came, I would reveal just enough. I stood before the mirror in full silver. I didn't recognize myself. And that was exactly the point. When I stepped into the ballroom, no one noticed me at first. I blended into the shimmer and candlelight, into the whirl of music and perfume. But as the night wore on, people began to turn. Whispers followed me. Who was the girl in silver? Why did she speak so little? Why did the foreign prince bow so deeply when she passed? Lily was draped in gold, wearing a sun-shaped mask, already glowing under the attention. But her smile faltered every time she looked in my direction. I caught Jake's eye from across the room. He didn't recognize me. Not immediately. But something in his expression changed. He stepped toward me. Slowly. Carefully. Like a man approaching a storm. When we finally stood face to face, he offered his hand. "May I?" I took it. The music swelled. We danced. And neither of us said a word. When the song ended, he didn't let go. "Who are you?" he asked. I leaned in close. "Guess." And then I walked away. Let him follow. Let her watch. Let the court wonder. Tomorrow, they would all know exactly who I was. But tonight, I was just a silver shadow. And for once, that was enough to silence them all. They called her the Silver Phantom by morning. The masked guest who left no name, who danced like a ghost and vanished before the final toast. The court was in an uproar. The nobility speculated wildly, some said she was a spy from the Northern Isles, others claimed she was a royal mistress in disguise. Lily, of course, dismissed the rumors with a sneer, but I could see it in her eyes. She knew. She didn't have proof. But she felt it. And for someone like Lily, a feeling she couldn't control was more dangerous than an open accusation. Jake didn't speak to me the next day. He didn't come to morning council. He didn't linger near the garden walkways or pause when we crossed paths in the halls. But I wasn't worried. I had seen the way he looked at the masked girl in silver. I had seen the way his hand lingered on mine when the music faded. He might not have known who I was yet. But his instincts had. And that meant he was already mine. I spent the day gathering threads. The fake letters that Lily once planted to frame me had not yet been released, but I knew where they would be stored. A hidden compartment in her study desk, an ornate ivory piece carved with vines and lilies, as if the design alone could hide the poison inside. That evening, while she was at the chapel, I entered her chambers. The guards didn't stop me. They were used to seeing sisters pass in and out. I moved quickly. Found the compartment. Retrieved the letters. Read every word of my so-called confession. Then I smiled, replaced them with blank parchment, and locked the drawer again. Let her try to betray me with invisible ink. I didn't destroy the real letters. Not yet. They would serve me soon. Later that night, I sat at my window, the stolen letters spread out before me. Jake's note slid from beneath them. You are not weak. I was wrong. I remembered the look on his face at the masquerade. The moment our eyes met, the recognition beneath the confusion. I remembered the way his fingers tightened around mine, just slightly, like something old and forgotten had sparked awake. A soft knock came at my door. I gathered the papers, slipped them into the false bottom of my trunk, and called out, "Enter." Jake stepped inside. He didn't speak at first. Just looked at me. You disappeared, he said. You didn't look very hard. I followed you. And? I saw you disappear through the servants' wing. I almost stopped you. Why didn't you? Because I wanted to see what you do. I walked to him slowly. And what did I do? You turned the cord on its head without saying a single word. I stopped inches from him. Would you believe me now if I told you I've been doing that every day for the past month? He didn't flinch. Yes. I studied him. You knew it was me. Not at first. But I should have. That walk. That silence. You were louder in a mask than Lily is with a crown. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. She's planning something, I said. He nodded. I know. I have the letters. The ones she'll use to accuse me. I switched them today. She doesn't know yet. His jaw tightened. And what are you going to do with them? I'm going to do exactly what she planned. I'm going to make her bring them forward. Jake frowned. You want her to accuse you? I want her to dig her own grave. I want her to think she still has control. She'll try to drag you down with her. She already did. And I survived. There was a long pause. Then he said, I have something too. He handed me a scroll. Sealed in black wax. I broke it open and scanned the contents. A list of noble signatures, dozens of them. Names I recognized. Lords and ladies who had once stood against me during the trial. They're withdrawing their support from Lily, Jake said. I convinced them that her dealings with the Northern envoy are too risky. They're backing the king's original line of succession now. You. I blinked. But I was removed from the line, not officially. The decree was never passed through council. It was only verbal. They thought you'd be too broken to contest it. I looked down at the signatures again. Power. Real power. For the first time, it was in my hands. My heartbeat echoed in my ears. Jake stepped closer. It's your move now. I know what I have to do. He nodded once. Whatever happens next, you won't face it alone. His hand brushed mine. Just briefly. But it said more than words ever could. The next morning, I requested an audience with the council. I stood before them as the forgotten daughter. Quiet. Calm. Holding a sealed scroll. I bring evidence of a conspiracy, I said. Not to defend myself, but to protect the throne. The lords leaned forward. Whispers spread. Lily paled across the room, her lips parting just slightly. She hadn't expected this. I held her gaze. Then offered her the floor. Would you like to speak, sister? She hesitated. Then stood, slowly, clutching the folder of forged letters. I have proof, she said. That Princess Anna has been working with the northern envoy to undermine the crown. I said nothing. Just tilted my head. She opened the folder. Flipped through the pages. Then froze. They were blank. The court murmured. Confused. She flipped the folder upside down. Pages scattered across the floor. Still blank. I stepped forward. Calmly, I placed the originals on the council table. Signed. Sealed. Dated to match her deception. I believe these are the documents she meant to bring. Lily turned white. The head of the council cleared his throat. Is this a confession, Lady Lily? Jake stood. It's a forgery. And a treasonous one. Silence swept through the hall. Lily opened her mouth. Then closed it. She had nothing left. The guards moved in. And I stood still, unshaken, as the world turned upside down, again. Only this time, I was the one holding the crown by its throat. I didn't need a throne to prove I'd won. I just needed to walk into the ballroom in silver and watch them all go quiet. No one dared speak when I entered. Not the nobles who once whispered behind gloved hands. Not the advisors who once signed orders for my arrest. Not even the guards who once watched me fall. They knew now. I wasn't the girl they cast out. I was the masked shadow who tore their lies apart and rewrote the game. The coronation was held at dusk. The sky turned gold behind the palace windows as I stepped forward in the same silver gown I wore to the masquerade. Jake stood to my right, the council to my left, and the king, too weak to rise, placed the crown in my hands. He didn't speak. He only nodded. And that was all I needed. I turned to the court. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I met their eyes, one by one, and watched every head bow. Not out of love. Out of fear. Out of awe. And maybe, from a few, out of respect. Afterward, I walked the marble halls alone. The crown was heavier than I expected, not just in weight, but in memory. I passed the courtroom where they once condemned me. The chamber where I'd burned Lily's letters. The window where I first decided I wouldn't die begging. All still here. All mine now. Jake found me in the old rose garden. No guards. No ceremony. Just us, where this war had really begun. It's done, he said. Almost. You don't have to keep fighting. I do, I said. But now I get to choose who I'm fighting for. He studied me, silent. Then, you're not the same girl I once ignored. No, I said. She died. This one knows exactly what she's worth. He smiled, rare and real. And does she want to rule alone? She doesn't need anyone, I said. But she might want someone beside her who never looked away. Even when she burned. He reached for my hand, not as a knight, not as a subject. As someone who'd watched me fall and helped me rise. You wore silver like armor, he said. But you never needed it. I did, I said. Until I realized I was the blade. We didn't announce anything. No wedding plans. No royal proclamations. Just two people who had been cut by the same palace and chose to walk through its ashes together. Lily's name was never spoken again in court. Her estates were absorbed. Her allies scattered. The nobles learned quickly that silence wasn't safety, and loyalty wasn't optional. When I returned to court the next morning, I wore silver again. Not as armor. But as memory. Of the girl who once stood alone. Of the queen who now ruled. Of the ghost who danced at the masquerade. And the crown no one dared challenge again.